Hello, everyone. How are you? Hi. My name is Paul Miller, aka DJ Spooky, and I'm a writer, artist, and musician visiting from New York. And when Heather asked me to participate in this, I was like, wait a second, I don't do medical apps. But what I want to do today is walk you guys through some issues around creativity and design, and in ways that we can think about the creation of cultural capital that I think might actually have some really interesting resonances with how people think about the idea of health and creativity. So I have a quick question I want to ask everybody. How many of you used Napster? Oh, okay, that's about 70% of the room. How many of you guys use Facebook? Probably, okay, about 90-something. Okay, now, in the ancient late 90s, there were two guys. One was named Sean Fanning, the other was named Sean Parker. And they happened to be listening to my music back at that time, and Sean Fanning wrote the source code to Napster when he was about 16. So, amusingly enough, that was one of the first shareware kind of web applications that really caught fire. And so recently, they just did a film called Downloaded, A Brief History of the Rise of Social Media, and they asked me to do the score to the film. So I want to just play you guys a quick clip of this because it's very interesting for our current moment, but just through the rearview mirror, and then I'm going to walk you guys through some issues around apps, design, and the idea of the creative impulse in how we think about culture and renewal. So here we go. The network's a little slow, so hopefully it'll be okay.
You're talking about revolutionizing the way we use computers.
The fact that you could kind of share emotion over the internet, something so important to you, you could just trade so freely.
That's what was so profoundly different about the explosion of the internet, was that it was one network. So suddenly you could be connected to everyone.
I released an early beta version of the Napster software during the summer, and it spread quickly by word of mouth. It hasn't stopped growing since.
Just, wanted to create a way to meet people through music. Music will be ubiquitous, and we believe, you'll be able to get it on your cell phone. You'll be able to get it on whatever the device of the future is.
We knew it was a long way off from all the music being available digitally. And then there it was.
I just felt like this was one of the great moments in human history.
This is a company that is building a business. They've got venture capital money.
My response to them, I couldn't type it fast enough, was, don't take the money. You don't have a business.
They're building a business by facilitating the stealing of artist music.
We saw the clicks of the numbers, and that's what they were downloading at that particular time. That was shocking.
The music business is a great example of just complacency being a total death sentence.
I thought that the way that people got music for the last 50 years worked.
The record companies are not adjusting to technology.
Major music industries, entire floors were turning their lights off.
I'm bootleg proof, you dig? That's great, isn't it?
Metallica was coming to our office.
What we're merely doing is giving Napster the information that they thought that we couldn't get them.
Napster is stealing from us, straight up, and I'm going to fight them to the death.
As last fall semester wore on, hundreds quickly turned to millions, with the program spreading across college campuses like wildfire.
Nearly 60 million people use the site to swap music files from each other's computers for free.
We literally went from being high school kids leading normal, mundane lives to 12 months later bringing one of the largest U.S. industries to its knees and basically fighting what is the largest corporate lawsuit in the history of the world.
Lawyers representing Napster and the recording industry squared off before a 3-judge panel.
What is it capable of being used for? We are not trying to stop the internet, certainly.
The final word on Napster will eventually end up coming from the U.S. Supreme Court.
Music downloaders, beware. The recording industry is suing computer users.
What they've done is to turn an entire generation of kids into electronic Hezbollah.
A bomb went off, and nobody knew what the hell was happening.
It has changed everything.
It's obviously so big, it's out of their control.
The cat wasn't going back in the bag.
Now the people have a choice.
There's no stopping it. This revolution is already taken place.
So when I was scoring that, wow, this is a very temperamental stand here. When I was scoring that film, one of the things that was going through my mind was how do we think about the role of information in exchange and the idea of forging a new culture from the exchange of, or the free exchange of information. So I'm a big fan of people like Richard Florida and his book, The Rise of the Creative Class. I'm a big fan of Lawrence Lessig with his book, The Future of Ideas. But above all, one of the things that really strikes me right now is that as we build more and more information, we have a very deep sense of being able to describe how human activity can generate better awareness of how we interact with the planet. So we're now in what many paleontologists or geologists are calling the Anthropocene era, where human activity has altered the planet as we know it. Of course, with climate change being one of the principal, I think, threats to humanity in general. So in fact, the US military now considers weather a weapon. So one of the more intriguing things that comes out of the idea of climate change is that we have information about the information. So I just want to show you a quick statistic. My next book, my first book was called Sound Unbound, third book. And my fourth book is called The Imaginary App. And I've been very interested in how digital media is transforming creativity at every level. So say, for example, if we're looking at 1 internet minute, we can see over 2 million plus Google search engine queries. But just keep in mind something like the fact that one Google search engine query uses the same amount of electricity and energy to boil a cup of water. So if you start thinking about the sheer volume of information and electricity and use of resources that this is consuming, it's mind-boggling. So when you look at data centers and the sheer volume of energy that our culture is using, these are things that really, I think, factor into how we need to start thinking about not just physical health, but also psychological and emotional, the way computers interact with how people build culture. So my nickname for this is Coded Culture. Now, my last book was called Sound Unbound, and I published with MIT Press, and most of my work is looking at creativity in contemporary art and music. So recently, that book, what we did was we tracked down one of my favorite people dealing with apps, but before there were apps. There was a gentleman by the name of Alex Steinweiss, and if you're not familiar with his work, he's a very interesting guy, and I'll walk you through why. The book was on MIT, and I interviewed a lot of composers, artists, writers, and musicians about the role of digital media in their creative process. So we got Pierre Boulez, Chuck D from Public Enemy, Manuel DeLanda, Cory Doctorow, who does Boing Boing. I even got Jaron Lanier and also Daphne Keller, the senior legal counsel to Google. So we had the book launch at Google, and it was very interesting because we got a chance to really start talking about raw data. And now Google's doing stuff like Google Medical, where they're being able to compare if people are doing search engine queries for health issues, they can actually start tracking vector models. But above all, when you're thinking about collaborative filtering, which is the basis of, I think, much of the web right now, you have to imagine how the role of graphic design informs creativity. So one of the people I ended up checking out was Alex Steinweiss. You may or may not know him, but you should. I'm going to just kind of give you a reason why. So Alex Steinweiss is considered to be the inventor of the record cover sleeve. And intriguingly enough, his relationship to graphic design comes from the way the record cover sleeve really influenced the 20th century's imagination about music and art and design. So what I want to do is point out one or two things about the way images influence creativity and how we think about apps in our current digital media culture. This is Alex Steinweiss in his studio. And what's really amazing about this is that the smallness of the form. And I'm going to get into a reason why I think this is really interesting. So these are some of the first record cover sleeves. And intriguingly enough, if you start thinking about the ecosystem of images that records kind of generated, you can easily kind of be aware that they have influenced imagination at every level. This is the first record cover sleeve. And if you go from that to our current moment of this, you can easily see how apps have inherited that same sense of graphic design and being able to speak a language that has a very specific coded culture. So the iPad first came out April 10, 2010, and your average kid now looks at a magazine as an iPad that doesn't work. You know, it's kind of, you'll see them kind of, they're trying to make the images move and so on. And so what's eerie about that is there's a new kind of literacy at work, and a new kind of literacy that, in fact, enables people to look at information and ecosystems and graphic design, and above all, how they digest information in a radically different way. So my next book is called The Imaginary App, and I wanted to trace the impact of how apps had changed creativity. But when you look at what an app is, it's essentially a software that allows people to interact with a screen. And when you look at that, there's a whole tactile sense of how people engage the surface of this object. So the book is with MIT Press, and I'm really fascinated with new forms of literacy and creativity and design, and how these are kind of impacting on almost every aspect of when people think about development. So if we're looking at Africa, many people have always talked about the digital divide. I'd like to talk about the digital subdivide, when people go into this notion that there's the next billion people who are going to be online, and what's that going to do to an internet minute? So when Heather asked me to participate, one of the examples I wanted to give was environmental issues. Now, this is an example of one of my favorite authors, Adam Smith. Adam Smith wrote one of the classics of development theory, which is called The Wealth of Nations. But one of his more esoteric essays is called Of Water and Diamonds, and it was in his theory into moral inquiry. And he said, why is water, which is essential to life, free, whereas diamonds, which are almost useless for certain at that time, but kings would go to war over them. You'd have, if you look at Congo, they're still going over war, over them. But above all, why this precious material, water, versus something that essentially was just about scarcity? Diamonds are artificial scarcity. So he did a series of investigations into this idea that eventually led him to this idea of free culture. I'm going to use that as a way of describing a robust relationship throughout the next dialogue, but I'm going to try and evoke that because I know you guys are dealing with health, from the idea of collaborative filtering and creativity as ways of creating, again, a more robust dialogue. So this is me hanging out in Antarctica. And I went there with a studio and a backpack to check out the impact of climate change from a first-person point of view as a composer. And I went there for 6 weeks. I'll just show you really quick. One of the gentlemen who discovered the South Pole is Roald Amundsen. And what's beautiful about this is he's wearing a seriously hip-hop gear, So we just do a 21st century update. And, you can kind of get a good sense of how all this is working. So basically, one of the things that I noticed was the human sense of scale. Now, this is an incredible glacier field that looks like a nuclear bomb had gone off. And I carried a studio in the backpack. I was there for about 6 weeks and wanted to see the ice melting because there's this huge cloud of misinformation about climate change, which is very real and happening much more quickly. And again, there's going to be a tremendous amount of health issues as waters change course, seasons get more intense, heat. We've had record level droughts, many fires and so on, and of course, ice melting in both the North and South Pole. So I carried a studio. And one of the things, it took me 8 hours to walk from here up to the side of this mountain here. And this is the side of a mountain that the entire glacier had scraped away as it was sinking. And you can just scroll back. And one of the things I noticed when I was composing is this project was commissioned by the Metropolitan Museum in New York. One of the things that I noticed was that it was very difficult to convey the sense of scale. And people looking at design, I'm going to go over it just a hair as we go in here. So hanging out with these penguins, then going through these ice fields, and trying to figure out how to compose music to reflect that, to come back to New York for a concert. So the first thing I noticed is that when I was talking to people about it, they couldn't get the sense of scale until they saw a person in the landscape. And you realize that tremendous change is occurring, and that it's the delicate balance of nature on this planet has radically been changed. So what I did was go into what they call ice core sampling, which is essentially you dig into the ice and you can discover what particles were in the air from millions of years ago. And the scientists use this as a way to track how climate change has evolved over the course of millennia. But if we want to get a little deeper, one of the fun things about this is, I have to admit, black people, we love ice. So we have Iceberg Slim, you got iced tea, Ice Cube. If you got the white guy, you got Vanilla Ice, So that's the poetry, right? So if we want to get scientific, you can start looking at the actual molecular structure and start looking at the math, because that's the key crucial thing right now, math. So here's an average snowflake, and you can see there's a hexagonal form that's in permutation. And when you start looking at more of them, you can easily see the recursive logic at work. And that is pure mathematics. So what we did was we charted that out and put it into a series of software design programs, made the equivalent of an app that could generate snowflakes mathematically. And then took that, and I worked with a quantum physicist by the name of Brian Greene, who wrote this book, The Elegant Universe. It's a very renowned quantum physicist out of Columbia University. And the idea was to do a series of compositions. And so we tracked down some of the earlier compositions or mathematics, because math and algorithms are synonymous here. And this is a gentleman by the name of Johannes Kepler, who in 1611 was on his way home, and a snowflake landed on his sleeve. And he was fascinated with the geometric form of it, and ended up writing one of the first essays to look at math and nature in a very robust way. This is called 6 Sides of a Snowflake. So we took that equation and then started doing music composition. And I just want to show you what that ended up becoming out of 6 weeks in Antarctica, and then hanging out in the ice, and then creating a concert. So that was the Metropolitan Museum. We took all these huge ice forms and then made a series of sculptures out of it, and each part of all the music in the piece was generated by the sound of ice. So just to give you a little bit more of a close-up. And people can do this with almost any data, and it's called data sonification. So that's a little bit more close in. We had thousands of people come, and the idea was that you were able to use music and art to reframe some of the issues in climate change. So how do we do that with medical material? How do we start thinking about data as the new palette? And so that's a provocation I'm going to throw out to you all today. But above all, if you start thinking about how art and design can help catalyze people, these are issues that I think you all in the audience might be taking home today from the idea that art can also help emotionally and psychologically catalyze more than sometimes the raw data. If you're arguing with Rush Limbaugh, you can quote how many mathematical statistics you want, but it doesn't matter. I'll leave it at that. So at the end of the day, the arts have a very important role as we move further into a data-based economy. And as an artist, that's the palette for me. So what I've done recently was I've figured out all the data from the book and made an app out of it with Apple. Al Gore had his book, but we wanted to do a DJ update, so we did this one called The Book of Ice. And all of the sections in the book are music compositions that are loops and layers that you can play or have a string ensemble play. And I wanted to figure out a book as an app as well. So each section of the book has these QR codes that when you click on it, take you to hidden websites that have, again, more data and information about ice and climate change from the viewpoint of electronic music. So just by clicking through the book, you get all this kind of hidden pages. And I was thinking about new forms of literacy. Again, I was talking to you earlier, the iPad and the idea of apps as places in the cultural landscape. So when you're making a book, of course, the next step is to make an app as well. So this is one I did where we took turntables and made them, this is the DJ Spooky mixing app, and I wanted to do everything that would be normally, this gentleman here has a huge table, I just show it with an iPad. And this is where I can kind of figure out some new creative tools. So what we did was take everything that would normally be in your record collection. Say, for example, let's sample the funkiest man alive, James Brown. He's probably the most sampled human being on Earth. And what we did was we made record crates out of it so that you could easily organize what I like to call post-playlist culture. So you can take anything from your iTunes library, anything from your SoundCloud files, and so on. And what ends up happening is this is a new form of literacy based on open media. Anyone can use it. It's a free download. We're making this whole idea of a new kind of musical literacy as a kind of a fun way of getting kids into new forms of sampling. So here we go. I'll just show a quick thing. If I want to call up James Brown, we'll just do that. And as long as you have a reasonable 4G network, or for that matter, if you've loaded it on. Actually, it's pretty addictive. So the fun part about sampling loops and layers is you're playing with memory, and from the fragments of old culture, you look at the idea of the archive as a living place. It's a place that you go to search for new material from old. From this idea of renewal, you then make these kind of objects more relevant to culture as it stands now. So the next batch of projects, we're going to be doing an app that makes beats out of your heartbeat. And that's going to be in conjunction with things like Nike Fuel, which is for joggers. You put it on your wrist, and the iPhone can actually have a camera that detects heartbeat. And you can do biofeedback so that you can learn your heart's rhythms and make beats out of that. That's in development. But this is the first one. We've had 15 million downloads, and it's been usually in the top 20 of Apple's downloads. So we've had a pretty good relationship with that. So with that said and done, I know I've gone over a little bit, but I did want to just say it's a real pleasure. I know I wasn't talking directly about music, but I'm talking about the musical economy, or the idea of the apps and creativity. So thank you.
Hello, I know it's getting late in the afternoon, and so I want to hopefully keep the energy high here. This is a wonderful presentation. We were able to catch bits of it from the side panels over there. But I think one of the things that strikes me is that, you know, this conference really talks about the coming together of so many different viewpoints, the idea that design, art, creativity, technology can really come together to try to make something, a technology usable to a wide swath of people that really interact with it from different perspectives. And I just wanted to start the panel off by really trying to get us to think about the future and the vision of what we can create within the app world to solve human problems, and how we can bring together the design world, the technology world, and really think about entrepreneurship also at the local level. So we've got a great panel here that all come from various places, and I want to give them a chance to talk a little bit about who they are and what they're doing, and then I'll go into a number of questions that I think will start the dialogue off. Before I do that, I just want to say I'm representing USAID, and you know, the donor community sometimes feels a little bit left behind. We're not necessarily known as being the most creative or the most risk-taking, and so I really do applaud the people I work with in the Office of Science and Technology who recognize that there's a world of action happening in the development of applications to support social impact, and they really want to get involved and start financing and finding ways to catalyze that community. One of the things that they're doing to do that is running tech challenges to really highlight or spotlight specific problems that they see within the world of development that they're working on, and try to inspire new actors to come to the table and really take this out of the institutional perspective and really go towards kind of bringing in and sourcing non-traditional actors into development. So I just, you know, one of the things that we saw recently, we ran a tech challenge for atrocity prevention. This was a White House initiative announced by President Obama to try to find tech applications that can prevent atrocity. And the winner really inspired me because it brought together the kind of collaboration that I think we need to come up with really impactful products and solutions. And that is, it's called Medicapped, and it's a collaboration between the Physicians for Human Rights, Datadyne, which some of you guys may know, and Informacam. And so they brought together software, this camera hardware, and the people who really understand that health workers at the front line need to be able to find ways to capture and document the atrocities they're seeing in their patients, the torture, the evidence around sexual abuse, so that they can safely transmit that to help hold perpetrators accountable. So it was a really interesting app that I think brought that collaboration together, and I want to sort of let everybody introduce themselves, and then we can dig into more about how we can promote that kind of activity going forward.
Well, hello, I'm Karim. I'm a founder and chief catalyst of Jocolab. Jocolab is, we call it a social change hub. Actually, we think we are an action tank. We're based on co-working space, and around the co-working space, we organize community, and we do action project actually from the trends we get from the community. So we don't try to see the future. We just want to make it emerge. So for us, the engine of that is the entrepreneur, and so we work around the value of be neutral. We don't have to get ideas about different technology. Be open to everybody, to every kind of technology. And we are really inspired by the open source community. I'm an open source activist, and finally we are a non-profit also. But this is because if we want to do things happen, we need to avoid every kind of conflict of interest and all those kind of things. So.
Thanks. My name is Ed Jezierski, and I'm the CTO of Instead. Instead is a nonprofit based in California that does design and technologies for health, safety, and development. We believe in the transformative power of design, and we have innovation labs in Southeast Asia and Latin America, where people from their own culture go out with the health workers, with the communities, and build what is needed, and then provide scalable platforms that other partners and NGOs can use in their projects. And to us, the interest in the applications world is to actually think about what is really an app and to take it beyond the little square icon on a screen, but rather how do we have the experiences and the data that can actually change the behavior to make things better. So a broader definition of an app is what I'd like to bring into this.
And my name is Matt Berg. I am at Columbia University in an engineering lab based in Nairobi. And we've been focused a lot on improving service delivery, whether it's in mobile health or increasingly a lot of the idea of kind of combining the fact that we have really cheap computers now, we have connectivity, to allow it to do prepaid services like prepaid electricity, prepaid water, which I think really introduces a lot of new opportunity in terms of bringing accountability potentially into aid and also allowing people to pay for what they consume.
Well, yeah, I'm Paul Miller, aka DJ Spooky. I'm the artist on the panel. So I use data.
You make it too.
So Matt backstage was talking a little bit about some ideas that he has for the future. We were talking about where you see the future of app development going and what you think is innovative out there on the horizon.
Yeah, so just to follow up quickly on that point, I mean, I think it's really exciting to be able to, so we're working on 2 projects. One's called Shared Solar, where we basically can meter consumption at the household level. The reason why solar panels and all that fail, if you go to a clinic, is that it's not run like a utility. If you charge people and provide them that kind of utility-like service, it actually works better. And we're working on another one called Quench, which allows you to have a prepaid card to get water. And that way we can, why I think it's exciting, besides the fact that it helps monetize recovery of cost, is that it's this idea of output-based aid, where donors can verify that a certain person received impact. And if you can do that, I think there's a lot of money to kind of help fill the market gaps that we see currently.
And Karim?
Yeah, I think something interesting is that we need to tap on the bottom of the pyramid, and that means you need to be innovative, but also innovative in the business model. So that's the main thing. And also, when you need to do it at the grassroots level. And those applications will start at the grassroots level to find solution for their situation. It's not from remote area.
So we had a great session earlier today where the health worker from Zimbabwe challenged all of us in this room and challenged the tech and the developer community with trying to find partnerships with users and really focusing on user-oriented design. And some of the models that you just mentioned, Matt, and Eduardo, you were talking a lot about, how you pair the technologist with the health workers itself to be able to promote a greater understanding about the challenges out there, both on the tech side and usability side, but also on the business model and the behaviors of people. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how those processes work and what you see coming out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that first of all, it's just an effectiveness question. When you're designing programs from afar, you don't get to witness all the forces that drive behavior of community health workers, of the populations, of the patients. And when you miss those forces, you design something that either will be gamed or misused or ignored. So, I think the first realization is that one may not be attuned ever to do that. Maybe somebody from the local culture and the local language will, which is what led to the creation of the iLabs, which is have this design emerge from the bottom up and have those ideas come from the bottom up. And especially now as we move into a space of healthcare where it's just not just the doctor or the community health worker, we're actually talking about interacting directly with the population. Services that help people stay on a treatment schedule, help them be informed about their health, help them interact with their own community and their own resources to stay healthy. Now we have to start designing this less and less as something that our health force should use in the enterprise context and really think about the consumer perspective of things. How can I build something that is compelling, that can recoup its cost so that it can scale to nationwide, and something that people will choose to use? And it's a totally different design perspective. And I don't think that kind of like fly-by design can do that. You really need to understand the context.
You know, I want to speak to that as well, which is that a tool is something that you use to engage a situation, you know. So like Marshall McLuhan used to say, we make tools and the tools in turn reshape us. So how we've been seeing, I think the last 10 years of design is that, I think you have to make it, flip that way. No, away from the speakers, actually. There, well, interesting, okay.
Why you say
is that somebody's phone? Okay, interesting.
Is the tornado warning?
This building looks strong.
I'm sure there's an app for that, right? I mean, you know, definitely. But, you know, when people started thinking about the role of software and culture, I mean, one of my favorite moments was when, say, for example, Namjoon Paik, the artist, did this thing called Global Groove. It was the first music video that took place over several continents, but it was an art project. And then, of course, you can see, you know, 30 years later, that's now the common vocabulary. So we have to always be aware that there should be a sense of playfulness and irreverence. Thomas Edison never thought turntables would be used for playback. They were meant to be recording, you know, machines to get rid of your secretary. You know, so there's always that sense of an accidental use of things. And in fact, most people never thought computers would be used for consumer devices at all. So we can see where that went. And, you know, for me, when I'm hearing these gentlemen speaking, it's beautiful to hear how they're very open to the bottom-up approach, because that's where I think the real meat of any kind of movement that's going to happen is crowdsourcing and free exchange.
I just had a question, DJ Spooky. It's kind of fun to say. You were mentioning I'm coming from like the head of, you know, digital divide. Like, what did you mean by the digital subdivide?
Well, when you start thinking about like the idea that Africa, a lot of people are saying that there's not enough access, but then on the other end of the spectrum, everyone has something to play some music. Everyone has, you can hear music ubiquitously everywhere. There's bootleg CDs, bootleg mixtapes. There's a certain kind of digital literacy that's not, you know, that's prevalent in most of sub-Saharan Africa, but it's not being used to a more robust thing. Say, for example, when they made banking microcredit that you could like update on your phone, even if it was a small so that's a subdivide. That's my nickname for it, and it plays with the granularity of how people think of this huge gap, which I think is actually very surreal, because there's actually a tremendous amount of innovation in Africa, but it's not in the same way that people are going to be thinking. Like in China, when I go to China, they're all using bootleg Google Android devices. Very low speed, you know, low quality processing speed for like cell phones, things like that. But it's still very robust, and the Chinese are taking apart their phones, figuring out all sorts of stuff. I DJ all over the world. It's a long story. So, yeah.
So again, it's innovation in business model, because if you take it, Mo Ibrahim, when he says, okay, I want to go to Africa, everybody say you're crazy, there's no market there. So he invented the prepaid
You haven't
model.
been in Nigeria.
Yeah. No, even the prepaid model, and now it's spread all the world, and we have the most active mobile rates in Africa. So that's mean if you change your perspective, perhaps you can see that it's booming there, and you need not to see it with the same lens that you're looking at it in the U.S. or in the other countries.
I mean, it's amazing because most Americans are very passive with their relationship to the telecoms. I mean, they'll just pay huge fees for your iPhone 5 or whatever. But in Africa, the bootleg economy and other, you know, India, Brazil, Russia, China, the economies are really, really robust in this kind of gray market area for software and other things.
Yeah. Perhaps the trends we have is that when we see the explosion of mobile, we see the explosion of internet, and now the connection we have with the mobile and internet, with like 50% of the population is now with a mobile, and in 2020 in Africa, everybody will get a mobile. We have 50% of the people who have a mobile who go to internet through their mobile. So it means now we have mobile is coming synergized with internet. So this is perhaps the best trend we have. And if we watch this smartphone or the tablet and the price is decreasing, then we have something new where we can engage with the population, because it can be multimedia. It's not only text. So perhaps we have new area for a lot of innovation on the field there.
I mean, just to add, I mean, I think just to your point, DJ Spooky, I think a lot of it's, unfortunately with the technology now, it's about consumption. and you don't have the authoring tools yet to really, to kind of like redo the remix you need. But they're doing a lot of Bluetooth swapping, so.
Yeah, and I think the notion of the apps that would be created is not just in the sense of the coding and the people who participate entrepreneurially. And one of the biggest insight moments for me working in this field was to see how health workers and community health workers specifically adopted different ways of using a tool to what they thought was the best use, just because the tool had been designed to allow them to decide how it can be used. And we're talking about starting to reach the population at large with mass voice campaigns and things like that. But what if a community health worker could fine-tune the health campaign that her cohort is experiencing through their mobiles? What if they could design, to some extent, how other people interact with the technology? And I think creation is not just of the coding up, but also like defining the killer use cases that will other people excited and change their behavior and make them more healthy and so on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's like what I'm seeing as an artist is that people are fine-tuning their use of software. Mm-hmm. And with the idea that when the iPad first came out and also Google Play, just a couple of years now, there was over 45 billion apps downloaded on just iTunes alone, but the Google Play Store is around similar numbers. And that shows a tremendous demand for this kind of information tools, and people want to be able to engage the material. And I think the responsiveness of the companies and so on is interesting, but it's slow. And that's where this idea of filling the gap is the innovation between spaces. And that's where I think, again, I look to Brazil, China, India, a lot of innovation in those kind of markets.
And just, you guys all work in places where you're connected with these entry points, these labs, these hubs, a place where people can come together and really start to collaborate and potentially even bring together those use cases, opportunities to describe the problems that they face and interact with coders in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if what kind of activities are being run out of those labs and how they're serving as that focal point, mm-hmm. and whether they're breaking down the silos between art, technologists, users, and entrepreneurs that are also looking at business models and distribution.
Right. I'll give a couple and then I'll. Yeah. So I think that it goes into different groups. There's one group that is definitely about capacity building and learning new things, and it's mostly about facilitating peer-to-peer sharing of technology skills, of like health domain skills, or even entrepreneurial or presentation skills. It's actually because it's led by the folks themselves. They choose what they need, so to speak. Then there's another area which is about entrepreneurialism, which is either helping people do pitches, understand how to build good business models, bring in people, let's say for the Southeast Asia lab from Singapore, to help them understand the startup life cycle, the difference between having a good idea and being a good CEO, and everything that goes into mentoring like a next cadre of business people. And then there's also the actual work where people engage in a project and say, we will help such organization that works, I don't know, with workers' rights reporting into having a better tool for something, so they actually get to roll up their sleeves and work. Usually what we find is that sometimes there's not enough challenges put through where people have the opportunity to really think about a problem hard and try to solve it. So sometimes people might have, in theory, good skills, but if you give them an environment in which they can flex the muscles, they actually gain that confidence to then say, well, and I have a business idea about this, and let me grow. So sometimes about creating a path of increasing comfort. And you guys might have a perspective.
Yeah, behind the idea of Joko Labs, we have the idea that Africa can bring more soul to the world. I mean, and we say entrepreneurs don't need to work only for their own profit, and then the individual profit that needs also to give back to the community. And because we are community oriented. And coming from that, the engine of our approach is based on entrepreneur, but the entrepreneur wants to get more, I don't like social entrepreneur, even if I'm a Ashoka fellow, but the idea is more than that. I mean, someone really connected to his community, and when I mean community, is interconnect to all the world, actually, even the nature. So, so this is something. So how to do that? It's a big story. We're thinking of it every day. But for the application things, first is capacity building, as you say. For us, is to structure the community, different communities of tech guys, to specialize them because they are doing everything for now. So how they can increase their capacity, their knowledge, and to be engaged in even worldwide network, like in the open source movement. After that, also, yes, there is some entrepreneurial skill. We want to build on it through competition, through also startup weekend, all those kind of events we are running there. So they can learn, and we do a lot of competition like that or some different events so they can mix it. The other thing is how you mix the techies with other communities. So we run either events so we can push for cross-fertilization of different communities. So, and at least we have, that's where we say we want an action tank when we want to engage. Like we have organized one platform for the electoral presidential election in Senegal, and it was to get all the information and to monitor the election, and it has been taking as the main platform for all the observer on the field. It has been done for nothing. And what was crazy is that all those activist guys who come with us, I mean, we were volunteer, and we come to the situation room in a 5-star hotel with money, I mean, coming from the wall and everywhere. It was smelling money, and those activists were doing the main thing, but for nothing. Yeah. So then you have a problem, because after the situation room, all the people stopped the project. I mean, the European Union observers go back. I mean, all the international observers go back, and the NGOs start their process because the election was finished. And then we say, oh, how we do it? Because we need to see monitoring. So that's also why we say we need to build a strong community, grassroots and locally.
Ultimately, it's just very unequal. The fact that I'm on stage talking about working in African innovations is representative of that. I mean, really all you have to do is you have to build the literacy, teach people the skills, give them the tools. Eric's talking about, give them the mills so they can make the next prototype. And then you have to nurture, you have to give them the skills, the tools to allow them to hack. And then you have to nurture them. You have to give them the contracts. Don't always bring in outside competition to enable, in the markets also, you're not going to have a lot of musicians making a living selling digital media if there's no market, nobody's buying it locally. So all these things have to develop. And then really, it's just going to, everything will be a local solution ultimately. But we have to really develop those, we have to nurture that to get there.
But also about hacking and developing is also something that confidence on yourself. And if you see all those people there, they think they are we are in Africa, Africa is poor, we can't do anything. I mean, everything is negative. And so they have a negative perception of themselves, and they don't think that they can do something that is really useful, can impact. And so when they start engage in those community and they see that they are doing great thing, or they're exchanging with people from outside, and they come and say, wow, you're doing something very interesting. And so they also gain in confidence, and so they want to be engaged in more finding way how they can do things, So also this is very important. And so it's a long process, actually.
Have you guys seen anything out there that's promoting south to south, local to local? Because it can feel isolating in one country or in one lab, in one community. And how do we share, Pan-Africa or from Southeast Asia to Latin America and let those local communities interact with like-minded people that are experiencing similar problems but in different contexts and with different realities?
What I've been seeing really is microcredit. That's been just such a massive, very interesting approach to almost any solution, So if people build credit in a community basis in India, or if they figure it out for Somalia, it works. It's eerie. But the beautiful thing about that, and even currencies like Bitcoin that is wildly popular right now, you're going to be seeing as people gain more of a stakeholder relationship to these kinds of media forms. My next book is called The Imaginary App. So we worked with 30 different theoreticians. We have material from people like Eric Schmidt on over to Raymond Kurzweil, who's the visionary in residence at Google. We also have people like Lev Manovich, who's a very interesting theoretician of apps. But everybody is talking about this idea of new forms of literacy. That seems to be the kind of new terrain. And when I was talking to MIT about publishing my book, we tried to do a series of surveys about some of the most intense places of telephony, like Korea, for example. South Korea has almost 100% everything, and incredibly high-speed networks, robust bandwidth, and high suicide rate at that too. Come to think of it, but on the other end of the spectrum, when you go to places like Somalia or Sudan that are like radically underserved, you have innovations from companies like Digicel or kind of quirky telecoms that fill those gaps. And people take the technology apart. They really try and figure it out. And that's a beautiful thing to see.
And I would also like to add there's like innovation spread that is not just between south to south, which a lot of the south is actually in the northern hemisphere, but regardless. Like for example, it's contagious. When we were setting up the first bar camps ever in Cambodia and so on, what we ended up doing is flying over people from Laos. And the Laos people would see a bar camp in action and say, we want our own. And they'll take their own flavor. And then when there was the one in Laos, we would fly over people from Myanmar and it would be like, we want our own. And just have people the ability to see others acting in a way that is, as leaders, is like, I can do that too. And basically, you get that south-to-south exchange of a behavior. Then in terms of south-to-south exchange of technology, the open source efforts that have been going lately, I think, are the most prominent examples. Even the one that Dickie was mentioning before that Matt and I had a chance to work on actually started as a project in Cambodia in the iLab at Instead, and then suddenly is becoming the National Health Facility Registry in Rwanda and other places, and with other people contributing to it and so on. So that's, I think, is a great example of people seeing a need that's off the context and replicating that also. And as a final one, I think that it's important to see the upwards one as well. We've been working with this company called Cepheid that provides the diagnostics machines for tuberculosis, the Gene Expert. And they're basically providing a cloud connectivity to all their diagnostics devices moving in the future. So you'll be able to see real time what is testing, who is testing and where positive for tuberculosis, de-identified, and so on. But this is going to be going throughout the whole world for all their devices. And a lot of their devices are in low-income countries, but also have high-income markets. And they're actually starting the design in Africa. And they're going to figure out the connectivity, the usability, the robustness, the ease of use, the low cost of operations in Africa and Asia first. And then that's the product that the US Postal Service and the CDC and DoD and all the others will end up using, which is, I think, a great example of what people consider the reverse flow.
But Edward, in the same context, one of the worst failures was one laptop per child. You remember this program where they tried to figure out, but my pull quote from what he was just saying, and the audience, I would love to, if everybody leaves with this, is creativity is contagious. Being able to innovate and improvise and remix and transform, those are, again, like Lawrence Leslie was pointing out in his book, The Future of Ideas. Just a very, very powerful tool.
I think in open source, the DNA of open source is international. So, it's very interesting because even like in the movement of co-working, we have what we call the co-working visas. So you can exchange with like 200 co-working space in the world. And it's more open in the emerging country than in the other country. That's something specific. I was surprised, like when I went to India, that some company was just running with the sun. So they can work 24 hours, And when it looks like internet have no territory. And I think you have a problem because coming from the States, you want things to come from the state or be based on the state or be centralized from the state. Even Google, that's why they spread out all the world and opening office everywhere. They have one in Dakar, actually. Because they say internet is not anymore a thing for the US customer. It's for everybody, it's for the world. The population of the world will be Indian, Chinese, and African. So how we do, So we need to go for international approach to open our mind. In Jocolab in Dakar, we have 22 nationalities who are working on our co-working space, out of 35 people. It's incredible. And we just opened in Paris. An initiative will start in Dakar. So, and the same spirit, So, the world is now the playground, and let's go for it.
I was just gonna, you mentioned China is the ultimate remix, where they just, south to south. Yeah. They take American ideas, they make it really cheap, they add 4 extra SIMs, and then they ship it all over the world. So that's, for me, has been the inspiring thing, seeing China and India push product.
Yeah, so clearly we're becoming more and more global, and there's so many lessons from the communities that you guys are working with. What final lesson would you give to these kind of communities in the United States in terms of how they can improve their collaboration, their culture of open source, to be able to promote more innovation here for apps to save the world? Final words.
I think it's already done. And if it's people from the open source world, I mean, we receive every day people are coming, even they're paying for their ticket and everything. They come to Senegal and they make trainings, they share their knowledge. I mean, this is the DNA of the open source community. What is interesting is that they are the hackers are the ones who have created internet, and so in the digital world, I mean, they put in the DNA of this digital economy those approach of collaboration, sharing, and not just being working for your individuality. So it's what is interesting is that now you get this coming out, and more you get those kind of in-conference coming from the spirit of the Barcamp, you know, all this approach of innovation and things. So it's coming from the hackers world and all this. So it's very interesting. So everybody is becoming a hacker, actually.
I think in high-income countries, it's, I mean, we have a lot of use to social enterprises in low-income countries, but in high-income countries, I think there's more need of people to actually think big and think about the system in which we're living. I mean, there's a lot of overconsumption going on, and there's a lot of unsustainable systems. And, you know, having countries meet the US way of life as a goal of development is actually self-destructing as a civilization. So I think what we need more is people who think as a social enterprise, not just in the area of like helping mothers in Africa, but also how to get to more sustainable systems. And it could be from thinking large, like, you know, electric cars or whatnot, but it could also be smaller things that improve everyday personal behaviors and things that make you change yourself in the context of a high-income country.
You know, just to follow on with Ed, I think when people, you don't have to go to Africa, or please don't if you want to make things better. I think scratch your own itch, fix the problem in your own backyard. It's something you understand well, and just do whatever you can to make the world a better place, whatever app, because you have a lot better chance if you actually understand what you're doing, you know? And then if it's a really good idea, maybe it'll spread, you know? So.
Okay. You know, one of the beautiful things about this panel is like what Karim is talking about, or what Ed is doing, and what Matt's doing, is for me, I'm going to sample them. And I'm trying to figure out, as an artist, how apps really empower people through giving new kinds of palette. You know, it's not just about sculpture or painting, but looking at this idea that literacy inspires creativity, and the way people think about digital media. My nickname right now is that we're saying it's all about coded culture. So if you look at hip-hop as one of the most innovative art forms to come out of the late 20th century, a lot of it comes out of the bootleg economies of like places like Canal Street or 125th Street, where people had cassettes, CDs, you name it, bootleg material from everywhere. If you're in Dakar, you'll see this kind of stuff. But the people will go for these kinds of economies of scale because their culture is coming out of that. And that's where I think you can never underemphasize the role of cultural capital. So, you know, I think what I'm hearing from all of these gentlemen is that how the creative process comes from the the bottom of the pyramid is going to be the place of really intense momentum for the next several years. And that's where apps, I think, have a critical role to play.
Well, thank you guys. We really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.